And good evening. Welcome to Gator's Garage, home of all things Gator and all things historical gaming in Savannah, Georgia. This evening, we're going to be talking about what is arguably our most popular game, Bolt Action, a World War II skirmish game that has played all over Georgia. We're going to have as a special guest tonight Mr. John Ross, who runs the Bolt Action part of the WarZone tournament up in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm going to bring him on. And Mr. John, tell us a little bit about how long you've been gaming, what got you into Bolt Action, and how long you've been running Warzone.
Well, great. Well, first off, thanks for letting me come on your show. That's cool. And I think we did this after your last tournament, or we said we'd do this quickly after your last tournament because there were a bunch of questions that kept coming up. And so why don't we just do an FAQ show? But I find at tournaments all the time that there are a lot of questions that seem to come up over and over and over again in your event, in the events that I've had Adepticon, at our event, Warzone, which is in Atlanta, usually in the fall. So hopefully we'll have some fun tonight.
Absolutely. Oh, that's the first order of business is to have fun. If we're not having fun, we're not doing it right. So, how long have you been gaming?
And forever, I mean, like a lot of us, I started off with Avalon Hill games and little hexes and cardboard markers, and I played D&D with some friends in high school, and didn't really do miniatures until much later when my son got Warhammer 40K, the starter set, and he took the Space Marines, and I took the Space Elves, and here I am, 30
There
years
you
later.
go. Fantastic. And then when did you get into Bolt Action?
In version 1, we were at Historicon, and I saw they were doing a little mini tournament, and I saw some people playing with it, and the 28 millimeter miniatures and the houses. I mean, it's like every boy's fantasy of what toy soldiers should have been like when you were a kid, but they weren't because you had those lame green army men that didn't stand up, only 5 poses. So you look over and go, wow, that looks really fun. Kind of strong-armed my friends into all getting an army so we could all play against each other, and sort of never looked back. So I've been doing it now since V1 and run tournaments on it and go to tournaments all over the world. And I'm the U.S. U.S. country representative for the World Team Championship for Bolt Action out of Europe. So how crazy is that?
That is pretty cool. It is really, I was telling someone today that is really interesting the people you meet and the things you get to do in this simple little hobby of playing with toy soldiers. And that is amazing, John. And again, I want to thank you for coming on our show. You are very well known, at least within Georgia circles and certainly within Bolt Action circles. And I know after debriefing after our last tournament, which by the way, to the audience, to you, y'all have really made our tournament successful here in Savannah. We're going to have another one coming up, I think, in August, and y'all's support has just really made this thing shine. But there were questions that came up, and of course, I guess we'll go ahead and segue into those questions. I'm sure, the people that are watching, yeah, we're still, we're looking for version 3, but that's not going to drop for another 3 months. So we're still going to be tooling around with version 2. The big tournaments are still running version 2, and knowing these rules and their interpretation can streamline play, and that just makes for a more pleasant game experience. So go ahead, John.
So what I did is I put together a little PowerPoint presentation here. Let's see if I can show it, and then we can go through it together. And I'll just ask you questions as we go along. So share
That is
screen.
fantastic. Yeah, you should be able to share your screen. And
there we go. And let's go
add
to
the
this
stage. Okay.
And
that is fantastic.
Tell me what you see.
Hey, perfect. Tournament frequently asked questions, June 2025. Okay.
All right.
That's fantastic. Good deal.
These are all These are all things that I see come up at tournaments over time. So the first one, this one causes beginner players and experienced players. They get confused on how this works over and over and over again. I've got an artillery piece, I've got a tank, there's some infantry hiding in a building, there's a sniper up in that window or whatever, and I want to shoot at that building. How do I shoot HE at a building? And it functions differently than all the other ways that you shoot HE or shoot direct fire in the game. It's got its own peculiar set of rules, and it seems to just cause everyone, fits.
Now, I notice here that you have both the page number of the book, of the rule book, and of the FAQ. If you don't mind, if you would, I think you're a member of our Pulaski Guard. If you wouldn't mind uploading that presentation to our Pulaski Guard page, that'd be fantastic. And then I'll upload it and make it available as part of this video as well.
Absolutely. I think this is the kind of thing where, you'll see this and then you'll remember that there was some rule about it, and then you're playing and you can't remember how it goes, and that's when you learn. So you go back and you check on it again. So I'd be glad to share this. Okay, so we're going to shoot at a building. We got this howitzer, and we're going to shoot at that sniper up in that bell tower. So shooting HE, what we're talking about here is not shooting machine guns or small arms. We're not talking about firing a main gun tank, with an AP shell. We're talking about high explosive, all right? And this is direct fire. It's not indirect fire. So you roll the hit just like you would on shooting on anything else in the game, with one exception. So if you moved, if you are long range or point blank, if it's a small team, if they're down, if you've got pins on you, whatever modifiers you would normally take, the HE weapon will take as well, with one big exception: there are no penalties for cover. So if you haven't moved,
Okay.
right? If you haven't moved and you're at short range and you're shooting at a building with an infantry squad inside of it, so 3 or more guys, and you're firing at that building, it's a 3+ to hit. That's it. And a lot of people think it would be 5+, because it'd be 3 plus the 2 for hard cover, but it doesn't. No penalties for cover when you're firing HE.
Got
So
it.
in this,
Okay.
I'll set this up. Here's a little quiz. So I'm shooting at that building, and I'm going to fire HE at it. There's a sniper up in that window, so he's a small team, and I'm at short range. I'm going to fire HE direct. What would it take to hit the building?
At short range, would be 3+.
Yep. But he's a
Okay.
small team.
Oh, wait. So that's going to go to 4+.
That's going to go to 4+. And then if he decided to go down, it'd be a 6.
That would go to 6.
Right. So the easiest way to remember this, gets people so confused. And one of the reasons why it's confusing is because the full rules aren't actually in the rule book. There's rules on page 124, and then they came back and clarified those rules in the FAQ like 5 or 6 FAQs ago, so that it's easy to be confused about this. But the thing to remember, just super simple, is I'm shooting at a building. Every penalty that I would normally take applies, except no penalties for cover. And you got it. All right. So then after you shoot the building, okay, so there's a sniper and his buddy in there, and you're firing this. Let's say this is a 3-inch template, and then you hold the template over the build. Oh, wait, that doesn't work, because people in buildings are abstracted, right? You have no idea where they are actually in the building. You just throw your models in there. So what you do is instead of just getting one, putting the template over it, you roll a number of dice equal to the table that they've got, called HE table, hits versus targets in buildings. And that's what that little table means. So in this instance, 3-inch table, you would pick up the dice, you'd roll 2d6, and that's the number of hits you got against that 2-man sniper team.
So you could hit that 10 PDQ, and that's going to bring the building down.
That's the other rule that's unique in this game, is you fire HE at a building, and if you got 10 or more hits, the entire building is destroyed. And if the building is destroyed, everybody in it on every single floor is also killed. So very dangerous.
Yeah, I think we've been noticing, how dangerous HE is, and interestingly enough, Chris and Randy were playtesting their armies against each other, and Randy had a squad of the infamous Gurkhas in a building, and Chris was like, "That's no problem." Rolled up with a howitzer and blew them out of the building. Actually,
It's-
blew the building down on them. And Randy was like, "Dang!" But to your point, that's how the rules work. That that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the
Okay.
only thing, yeah, you just remember no penalties for cover, and then you roll this. So this is it. Also very interesting. You put a small team in a building like that. Someone fires a howitzer at you. Normally with a template, you put a big template over two guys, you're going to get 2 hits. That's it. But when you fire at guys in a building, you could conceivably get 12 hits on that 2-man team. So it makes buildings. If there's HE on the table, buildings are a death trap.
Which I think is kind of as it was. I know my dad tells the story of running some VC into a temple, um, and he tracked him in with his 66 millimeter law rocket, and he was using the crenellations, the round holes in the wall, as an aiming point. The rocket went through the wall and went off inside, and they just went in and cleaned up what was left. And I know in Squad Leader, which I think you and I have talked about, if
Yep.
you get a critical hit on a building, it reverses the terrain modifier. So, yeah, buildings can be quite a death trap if there's HE knocking around. I think, and then historical example, I know in Stalingrad, the Germans and Russians actually found rubble easier to fight in because you couldn't drop it on somebody's head.
But the lethality of HE versus buildings catches beginning players by surprise because you think I'm going to run in this building and I get the extra protection rule. But remember, so the extra protection rule is the rule that says there's an extra +1 to wound. So if you were a veteran in a building and someone shot a rifle at you, you'd be a 6 to wound, not a 5. But that doesn't apply to HE either. So HE negates all the advantages of buildings, and they add a bunch of really, really ugly, nasty ones on top of it. So just be real careful as you're playing. Okay, let's move on.
Yes, sir.
All right, we already did that. Let's do, I went backwards. Okay, here's an example. So we've got some Frenchmen down there in the bottom of the screen, and they are the front row is standing against the wall. There's 6 in the squad. They got some rifles, and they're going to shoot at those Germans out there in the open. And let's, even though it kind of looks like they're in a field, let's pretend that's open ground. All right, they're going to shoot that German
Okay.
squad, and it's short range. So in bolt action, everything starts at a 3. So at short range, those rifles would be a 3 to hit. But there's a wall in between them. The front 3 guys are against the wall. The back 3 are not. What does it take to hit that squad?
I would normally say 3+ for the whole squad because I always count anybody that's touching as shooting over the shoulder.
So, so you're right, but it's actually a quite fine point. So the way it works is, if 50% or more of your squad is against the wall, then you do not convey the cover save to the target that you're shooting at. And boy, that phrase drives beginning players crazy. Like, what does convey the cover save mean? What does that mean? So let's imagine this in this instance that there were only 2 guys at the front and there were 4 at the back. Then 50% of your guys are standing away from the wall. Only 2 are next it. So less than 50% are against the wall. When that whole squad shoots at those guys, that squad's going to get a +2 cover as if they were behind a wall themselves. Because more of your bullets are going across the wall than not.
Okay. I've never, I don't know that I've ever had that come up, or if I did, we played it just the way I described it at first. But I can see your point, and it's something I notice players don't pay near close enough attention to is the placement of their troops, especially heavy weapons, light machine guns, specifically, and then loaders. So, yeah, I could see where that would catch somebody sideways. Well, I got 2 guys up against the wall. Well, that's nice. You got 4 guys that aren't, so I've got +2 cover because most of your guys are having to try to shoot over that wall.
Yeah,
Okay,
and the way
I'll
I
have to
think of it,
remember that.
it is, you know, you'll hear a lot of people quoting a bunch of rules that actually don't exist in Bolt Action. I think some of them come from Flames of War, and some of them come from like 6th edition 40K. And, we've all played these war games where are you in the trees or are you not? That's a very common war game thing. But Bolt Action's
Yes.
rules are quite specific. If 50% or more of your squad, 50% or more, can trace a line of sight to the enemy squad, and 50% or more of them are not obscured, which they're not in this example, then the entire squad gets to shoot as if they were all up against the cover or at the edge of the trees.
Got it.
Right. And the
Okay.
way I think of it is, are there more bullets crossing the wall, against the obstacle versus less? And if you do that, you kind of get your head around. Okay, now let's take it a step further. Let's say that German squad, they're not stupid. They are 3 guys over there in the woods, and there's 2 in the open.
Right.
So now when we go to shoot them, is it a 3+ to hit?
Now it's very clearly going to be 4+ because over half of that squad is in cover.
That's correct. That's exactly right. So over half of the squad is in cover. In fact, the actual language is at least 50% or more of you are in cover.
Right.
Or in the dense terrain in this instance. Then the entire squad gets the cover save, even if some guys are standing in the open. And I tell you, this is where beginning players get confused too. So let's imagine that those 2 guys there in the side, let's say they were even closer, the closest guys. Doesn't matter. If 50% of that squad is in cover, then the whole squad will get cover.
And I see that would have been that could be a confusion among people who play Flames of War, where you can have units in part of a platoon can be in and out of cover. But it's that you're talking a different scale of game too. But that's a good one to cover off. That's one of those I've not wrestled with. I've not seen the first situation at least, or if I have, I dealt with it just the way I said. Normally, I think I've been pretty clear on that, but I will watch for that as I'm teaching people. Okay.
Yeah, you'll see people doing things, strange stuff, like they'll say, well, the front 3 guys are going to be in a 3+ to hit, and then the back 3 guys are going to be a 5+ because they're shooting over the wall. You'll hear all these kind of wacky rules and stuff. It just comes down to this: 50% of your more of your squad can shoot unobstructed, then the whole squad gets to fire as if they were unobstructed as well.
Roger that.
Now, how about this one? We're both in a wheat field, and the German squad wants to shoot at that French squad over there. Wheat fields conveyed a +1 to hit. So what does the German squad need to get to shoot that French squad?
4+.
4+. This one drives people bananas, and I don't know why.
Yeah, really.
Well, we're both in the wheat field, so therefore, the cover doesn't count. And I
wow.
We're both in the trees, therefore the cover doesn't. We're both in the root. No, it's not the way it works.
No. Yeah, everybody gets cover.
Everybody gets cover.
Okay.
Right? Everyone's going to get the plus cut. Even though you share the wheat field, it doesn't make the wheat field any less obstructing.
Right. Okay.
Now,
one additional. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One additional thing I often will do with wheat fields as well is treat them as obscuring cover, so you can shoot through them, but you get that +1.
Yeah. But Bolt Action makes a distinction of dense terrain. So dense terrain, if you're on either side of it and you shoot through it, you can see into it, but you can't see through it. So it's and unfortunately, the rule book doesn't have rules for wheat fields. The rule book doesn't have, and the rule book gives you an option how to play ruins. You can play them as dense or not. So you're up to you, which means everyone, confused. But
yes,
in this instance, the particular question I got over and over again is, we're both in the woods, so therefore, we don't give each other a cover save. It's like, no, we're all in the woods, but we still get the save. All right, let's go on.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So this is kind of a variation on that same theme. So in this instance, we have a squad of 6 Frenchmen here, and they're shooting at that German squad there in the open. 3 of the squad are against the edge. 3 of the squad are back in the wheat field. What's the roll to hit?
So this harkens back to the situation where you had us up on the roof of the building, and you had 3 guys up against the edge of the roof of the building, and
Yeah.
then the 3 guys immediately behind. So using that same logic, you're actually going to be a 3+ to hit because 50% of your squad can see the target. So it's going to be a 3+.
That's exactly correct. And this drives players crazy, especially if you have a large squad and they're like trailing out way deep into the woods or way deep into the wheat field. Because it looks like 3 guys would fire with no penalty and 3 guys would fire with the +1. But you don't do it that way. It's 50% or more, then you don't take the cover penalty. So
And I think I've adjudicated. I may have done that same thing, John, in that particular layout. And now that you've articulated that, that makes sense. Okay,
yeah.
look at that. I learned something new tonight.
Well, I mean, and it's intensely confusing, and you're going to see why it's confusing in just a second, because we're going to do this. All right. So that's a German motorcycle there in the road. And down there at that building is a 2-man anti-tank rifle team. And the motorcycle only see one of the 2 guys. And the motorcycle wants to shoot the anti-tank rifle before he gets shot. And it's short range, and he hasn't moved.
Okay.
What is it to hit?
It's going to be 4+ because the assistant gunner is behind the wall.
Okay, so the walls or stone buildings and stuff are a 2+. So it's either a right. This would be a 5. Your argument is that it would be a 5. Is that correct?
Or would it actually be a 3+ because even though the other guy is behind the wall, he's not technically in cover. This is one we've argued about before, where you've got part of the squad sitting in the open. The rest is behind the building, but not technically in cover.
All right, so here's the rule, and this is going to make people's heads just go bonkers, and it makes mine go bonkers. And by the way, I played this wrong for years. Okay. In the previous example, the rule said as long as 50% or more of the target is in that area terrain, they get the cover. That's really clear.
Right.
But when it comes to obscured, and this is in inches very specifically, the target is obscured by terrain or other models or something. So if you're obscured, you're not in the terrain, but you're obscured by it, you only get the cover save if more than 50% of the squad is hidden. It's an exact contradiction. It makes people just go crazy. So I shoot that anti-tank rifle team. There's only 2 guys, right? I shoot the 2 guys, and you would normally think, 50% of my unit is invisible to you, so therefore I get no. I'm sorry. So it has to be more than 50%. So in this instance, shooting that 2-man team, it'd be a 3, it'd be a 4-5 for the building, and of course 6 for small team.
He's going to get hard cover for being up against the building.
Right. Let's say it's a 6-man squad. Right.
Right.
If you see 3 guys and 3 guys are hidden behind the building, they don't get a cover save. You'd have to have We'd have to have 4 behind the building for them to get the cover save. So in area terrain, like in a wheat field or in the woods and stuff, it's 50%. And obscured blocked by something, it's more than 50%. Dumbest rule writing ever.
Right.
A lot of clubs just played as 50% and they ignored it. But if you start playing in the tournament scene and you meet up with someone who's read the rule and tries to play it by the rules, which is what we're supposed to do, you get a lot of people confused or caught by surprise by this one.
Okay.
The classic 2-man flamethrower team and only the flamethrower guy is peeking out, or the sniper, only the sniper, his loader's behind the building. Therefore, I'm getting hard cover. It does not work for 2-man teams. It does not work.
So that would be a 3-4 to hit then because it's a small team.
That's correct.
Okay. And the sniper's going, dang it.
Yeah. All right, let's reverse it. And let's say that two-man team, there's that hidden loader. He's going to shoot at that motorcycle. All right. And he's going to fire
Sure.
his tank rifle. So a lot of players get really confused by the damage. How do you kill a soft skin vehicle? So that's a soft skin motorcycle. So he shoots.
Sure.
It's a 3+ to hit. So he rolls the dice and he hits. And it's got the anti-tank rifle has a +2 penetration. So soft skin vehicles, we know, have a damage rating of 6.
6.
So first off is that soft skins do not get any bonuses or minuses for being on the side or the rear.
Right.
And this confuses a lot of people. They think, well, a tank from the rear is a -2. Therefore, if I shot at the back of that motorcycle, it'd only be a 4 to kill it. But no, they're always a 6 regardless of anything. They're just a 6.
Right.
All right. So you've got a +2 penetration on the anti-tank rifle. The little motorcycle's a 6, so you'd need a 4 to damage it.
Roger that.
Right. Now, let's say you roll, so you roll a 5, so you got a 7. What happens next?
7 would be a penetrating hit, and you'd roll a d6.
That's correct. You do roll on the damage table. There are a bunch of players that think if you do any damage to a soft skin at all, that it's immediately destroyed. And this is not the case. There's a lot of reasons why, Michael, I think people do that. So first off, in version 1, that was the rule.
Okay.
You had a soft skin vehicle, you didn't roll on the damage table. You just, if you did a penetrating hit, it was destroyed, right? They changed it to V2. And in V2, you do have to roll on the damage table. There's another reason why people is like, if you assault a soft skin vehicle, if you get any damage on it, you don't have to roll on the damage table. Any penetrating hit, when you assault a soft skin, it's automatically destroyed. So I think that that's why I think a lot of people are confused by that rule. But no, it's just like a tank. It's just like anything else. If you hit it, you got to roll to penetrate it. And then you roll on the damage table if you equaled or exceeded its damage roll. And it's always
hope they true that up.
Go ahead.
I hope they true that up in V3, because actually it would make sense that in both cases you would roll on the vehicle damage table. I would think, but that's just me.
Well, you do, right? You do roll on the. Or are you talking about an assault?
In an assault.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I guess it could be argued both ways, but yeah, it's one of the things people need to keep in mind. Because if you get hit with a machine gun, or with a 50 cal or an anti-tank rifle on a soft skin, and you get a penetrating hit, I guess even if you got hit with regular rifle fire and you got a 6, you're going to roll on that damage table. Now, if you get a 6, you're getting a glancing hit, which is a 1d3. So you still may not kill the vehicle. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you're assaulting it and you're successful, then it's toast.
It causes soft skin vehicles to be remarkably survivable in the game. So someone will rock up with their Stewart and they're firing 18 machine gun shots or something crazy, at a truck, thinking I'm just going to pepper that thing, right? And they need, say they move, so they need 4s to hit. So they get 9 hits. They go, great, I got 9 hits, and now I'm going to roll. I need 6s. And out of that, they get 1 or 2 6s, and they go, it's destroyed. No, you still have to roll on the damage table. And then they roll a 1 and a 2.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
Excellent.
A truck is probably, that the classic truck is probably way too survivable. Okay. All right. So let's talk about a moving vehicle. Okay. You would think this is like the most basic rule in the game. Really, really simple. So tanks, as we know, move 9, or they can run 18, and they get 1 turn. And that turn is up to 90 degrees.
Right.
And what I see people do, Michael, is they'll take their tank and they'll put this guy, I'm going to move my tank, and they'll put their tape measure out. In this case, the tank sitting on a road, but it doesn't matter. They'll put their tape measure out, and they just kind of measure where they want to go. And then they pick the tank up and they just plop it down where they want it to be in the facing that they want. It's like tank teleportation.
Right.
right? And because you can do that with your infantry, right? You just pick
Right.
your infantry and move them. Facing doesn't matter. The rest of it, you just move them along, right? Um, it kind of seems natural. Like, why can't the tank just go there? I just want to drive it over there. There it goes. But no, tanks move in a very specific way. So you move up, you
Yep.
measure the number of inches. You can turn at the beginning, you can turn in the middle, you can turn at the end, but you only get one turn. And so you measure it up to where you want to go. So in this case, I measured up X number of inches. And now I want to make the
Right.
turn. And then very precisely, I have to turn that tank. And now I have to, now whatever I turned it, then whatever my remaining move inches, so let's say I have 3 or 4 inches left, right? Then I get
Right.
to measure again and move the tank to where I want it to be.
Just so.
All right. So
Yeah.
first off, you should like grab a buddy and practice moving your tanks around the table, because that move up, pause, turn the tank the direction you wanted it to go, and then move it again. That's a very disciplined thing. It's probably the only fiddly thing about bolt action, because everything else is very loose and easy to understand. But this movement of your vehicles is very, very precise.
Let me grab a let me grab a segue here too. You kind of pushed a hot button of mine. Um, when people are learning this game, and when you're teaching people this game, and I'm saying this to whoever's listening, you really need to teach it in layers. I know, from our 40K forebears, we get the okay, we're going to do the escalation league and pile all the toys on the table. I've really found the best way to teach this, and I'm not the first one to do it. I really use the programmed instruction method that was first pioneered by squad leaders. So I'll start off with just basic infantry leaders and machine guns and make sure they get that nailed down, because as we just showed, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
Then I'll add in, I haven't done much with guns and HE. I'm starting to add those more into my forces. So that'll probably be the next level of training that I do, and just work through that 2 or 3 games. The key is to enjoy the game for itself while you're learning the layered rules. Don't necessarily be so quick to throw all these things at yourself that you don't nail down the rules. And then finally, to John's point, either add the tanks in along with the artillery and the infantry, or run them by themselves and get a feel for exactly how the tanks run against each other, and then add in the infantry and the artillery and the direct fire artillery weapons. Um, I completely agree with you on that, John. We had a situation come up. I was playing with a young kid the other day, and he had he had one of your friends. He had a Somna, I think a Somna 35, and I had my PSW 223, and I could outmaneuver him, but it was going to be a lucky shot for me to punch holes in his armor, and he finally figured that out, and he started hunting my armored car, but he had
Yeah.
to watch to make sure he made the right turn, and I think he made a 90-degree turn, rolled up, and see, this is where your turreted vehicles matter, because they can roll up and pivot that turret. And I'll do that in a heartbeat. I'll point that tank one way and flip the turret another to engage multiple targets or to cover multiple arcs of fire. Now here you're running a self-propelled tank destroyer, so they're going to have to turn the whole vehicle and use that full 90. And this is one of those things that when you're buying armor, a tank destroyer and a tank both take up that tank slot. But you think about your style of play when you're spending those dollars and those points. So I'll with all that being said, I'll get back off my soapbox and pass it back over to you.
Well, Bolt Action is a game where you could bring an all infantry force and be super competitive, and you can win tournaments, and people have. So you don't have to play with all this stuff. But let's face it, tanks are fun, big guns are fun. People want to put them on the table. So you just have to pace yourself as you do it. This tank movement thing is the only part of the game, a little bit in Assault 2, but it's the only part of the game where the game gets fiddly. Kind of reminds me of the old Warhammer Fantasy, whereas you rotated your block of troops for a charge, you would kind of bump into stuff and then you couldn't rotate anymore. And that's exactly what
Right,
happened with vehicles. And here is a great example of that. So here I've got a French armored car, and
right,
there's some friendly models there next to him, an inch apart, And that armored car wants to go up there and he wants to turn left and go down that alley and go shoot something. Okay. So you would look at that
Right.
and go, well, I don't know, that seems reasonable. I can go do that. And no, you cannot, because if that car moves forward and then he starts to turn, you pivot on the center of the vehicle. And I used to get this wrong all the time. You'll see people pivoting on the front or pivoting on the rear, doing all this goofy stuff. The vehicles actually pivot
Hey,
on the
John.
center.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say, recap that. We lost audio for just a brief minute.
The vehicles pivot on the center. They don't, not the front or the back, on the center. And so when you go to pivot your armored car, in this instance, you can't go any farther because you can't roll over your own dudes. So infantry can move through other infantry, but vehicles cannot. And so that car cannot make that turn. And I see this happen in games over and over and over again, where people set their vehicles up near a wall or a building or something, and they edge it right up against it. And then they want to turn and go off, and you go, you can't turn. You're stuck. You can only go forwards or backwards, because when you go to turn, you're going to ram your vehicle into the obstruction or to a friendly model in this instance, and you can't do it. In fact, you've got to end an inch away from your own dudes. So you absolutely cannot. Vehicle movement is very restrictive, and in order to play it right, you have to be really thoughtful about how you move stuff.
Interesting. Okay. I'm famous.
Go ahead.
I'm famous for taking full advantage of the reverse on armored cars.
Yeah.
I'll back up and pepper somebody in a heartbeat, and you'll catch people by surprise because tanks have to go forward. I don't even know if they can go in reverse. I don't remember. You can correct me on that, but I know armored cars get full movement in reverse, and at least full advance. And so I'll back that armored car up and light somebody up with it, and they're like, "Ooh, I didn't think about that."
Tanks can move backwards, but they only move straight backwards and only 4.5 inches, or only at half speed. So, and they can't turn when they do it. Reconnaissance armored cars and reconnaissance motorcycles, they can back up and turn, and they can do all kinds of crazy stuff. But tanks, trucks, anything that's not a reconnaissance, like a specialty vehicle like that, is very restricted in the way they move backwards. Okay, so that's actually going to come into play here. So let's take an example. So here's my martyr. It has 2 pins on it, let's say, and I go, well, that's 2 pins. I'm an armor 9. That's okay. I'm going to issue in an advance order, but I have to take an order test in order to do that. So you pick up your order dice and you roll, and I failed. What happens now?
Randy just taught me this the other day, or a while back. He's going to back up one full movement and then go down.
That is exactly right. He goes back, and of course, you only move backwards half. So he's going to go 4.5 backwards, and he's going to go down. And you have to put that down dice next to it. Now, down for a tank doesn't mean anything, except if you get assaulted. Because if you have a down order next to a vehicle and you're assaulted, you're only a 4+ to hit, regardless of how fast you moved.
Oh, wow.
So down doesn't give you any other benefits, only that one negative. If now if someone wants to assault you, but this is when people either they don't know this rule or they forget it all the time. When a vehicle fails its leadership an order test, it has to back up straight away. Now, if it's an armored car, it could back up and turn, and it could do some other things, but most vehicles are going to just back up straight at half speed, and then they go down. Pretty interesting.
Right. Yeah, I had forgotten that.
Right.
And like I say, Randy reminded me of that. And I was like, oh, this one's going to be fun. Tanks charging other vehicles. I want to see how you adjudicate that, because we had this conversation actually come up in the game between Randy and Chris. And we ruled that the vehicle can, the armored, the AFV can overrun that soft skin.
Yes, it can. Oh, yes, it can. So in this game, troops can charge each other. Troops can charge vehicles, and they can charge tanks. And tanks can charge people, troops. And tanks can charge artillery, and tanks can charge other vehicles and other tanks too. Big tanks can even charge buildings. And it is what we're about to go through, Michael, is the most complicated rule set in the whole game. So buildings have got their own unique set of rules, and tanks charging other vehicles have got their own set of rules. It's really complicated, and it almost never happens.
Right.
So you ready? All right. So in this instance, we'll be crazy. We've got a AA soft skin truck there in the open, and there's a Panther back there, and that Panther wants to charge that truck. All right.
Okay.
So first thing you do is you issue a run order. So it's not advance, it's a run. So on a run, tanks cannot. Oh, by the way, in order to issue for a vehicle to charge another vehicle, it has to be a tank. And in this game, tanks are classified as being tanks if they're 8+ armor.
Got it.
So my little Italian 7+ tankette cannot charge other vehicles, but my 8+ Puma can, even though it's not a tank, it's an armored car. So it's 8+ armored vehicles. 8+ armored vehicles can charge other vehicles. Okay. So now, next condition is I'm going to issue a run order. And a run order means there's no turns. So you have to be able to move straight and make contact with the enemy vehicle.
Right.
So if there were, woods in between you or something like that, well, you can't run through the woods, so you wouldn't be able to do it. So the conditions here are you have to set these up like the turn before, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to move into position the turn before and then hope you get the first dice and then charge out straight, because you can only move straight in order to pull this off, which is why it almost never happens. Okay. So now I'm going to charge it. So I move up and I'm going to move in contact with the vehicle. Oh, wait, there's another step before I do this. So in this instance, that Panther is charging a soft skin vehicle. Soft skin vehicle have no armor. Therefore, there's no risk to me as a tank. I don't have to take a leadership test. However, if I'm charging an armored vehicle, I do have to take a order test at -3 in order to do it.
Wow.
Because tanks charging other tanks, it's like scary, I guess. You don't want to damage your tank. So if that were a Matilda sitting there, or a French Soma or something like that, or a Sherman, I would have had to take an order test at -3. And if I failed the order test. And in the previous example, you'll back up 4.5 inches and go down. So remember, if you fail a test, you back up. But let's say I pass. Now I'm going to move forward. Okay, so here's what happens next. This is complicated. So we covered the first bullet. Tank versus tank, you have to pass the order test at -3. Or if it's a soft skin or a 7+ vehicle, like that little Italian tankette, you do not have to take the test. Then you have to issue the valid run order, and valid means there's no terrain in behind or turns, so you got to go straight ahead. Here's one people don't know, is the enemy vehicle can fire defensive fire in the same way that troops can when they're assaulted.
That makes sense.
It sure does, right? In this example, right, that AA truck's not going to do anything to the front, the armor 10 of that Panther. They might put some pins on it, but they can't hurt it. But if that were a Sherman or something, or a big heavy Soviet tank or something like that, you have to think twice about doing it, because he's going to get defensive fire at you from the moment that you launch the assault. So very interesting. Okay, so let's say he's down or he fires and doesn't hurt you. All right, you move up and you stop and you make contact with the enemy. Now, here's what happens next. So you take a D6 and you pick it up and you roll that D6 and you add your front armor to it. So a Panther's front armor counts as 10. So 10 plus a D6, and that's your penetration value. And the enemy tank does the same thing. So they pick up their dice and they roll that and they add their armor to it, and that's their rating. So let's say instead of, in this instance, I'm charging a truck, but let's say I was charging a Sherman. Okay, so the Panther rolls 10 plus D6, and the Sherman rolls a 9 plus D6, and whoever got the higher score is considered the winner.
Yeah, I'm not ramming. I'm not ramming any enemy armor. I'm just gonna shoot them.
And so you can see it is high risk. Okay, so let's see what happens next. Because after you've done this, you get winner and loser. Now, what happens? So the higher score is the winner. If there's a tie, and so let's say the Panther rolls a 1, so he gets an 11, and the Sherman rolls a 2 and gets an 11, they're both counted as losers.
Okay.
But usually you got a winner and a loser, all right? So if the loser is a soft skin vehicle, it's just destroyed. So in this instance, that Panther's coming in and it's going to destroy that truck because it's going to crush it, right? But in the instance,
It's like a beer can.
Right. If the loser had a higher armor value than the winner. So let's say it's the reverse. The Sherman's charging the Panther. The Sherman's brave. He's charging into the Panther. The Panther will only take a superficial damage roll. But if you have a higher armor value, this Panther charging the Sherman, then you would roll on the damage table normally, on the full damage table. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. If the winner has a lower armor value than the loser, they take superficial damage too, because you can damage your own vehicle. And if they both tied, you both roll on the superficial damage table. So it's conceivable you go charge in, you get a tie, you've got the same armor, you both take superficial damage. Oh wait, you can both destroy yourself in the assault. It's a little crazy. And then no matter what happens, whether you survive, whether they survive, what doesn't happen, you go down, and both the winner and the loser take a pin if they're both still alive at the end.
That makes sense.
So this is the most complicated table of what happens and how you do this in the game. And of course, the probability of it ever happening is extremely low, which means when it does happen, what happens is people get the rule books out and they start going through it. They start going through it step by step to do it. But it is fun. And it is the kind of thing where if you practice it a couple of times, if you kind of get the rules right in your head, you will absolutely catch people by surprise with it, because probably no one's ever charged their tank before.
That's what Randy and me and Chris. So I don't think Chris had ever done that, but I think he's been studying the rules. And so he hits Randy's truck, and Randy's jaw drops. He's like, and then we broke out the rule books, and it was like, yeah, that's how it works. And sucks to be you. So definitely, definitely, one more tool tanks have to hunt those soft skins. But even if the tank wins, if I'm understanding correctly, it's still going to come out with a pin.
It's still going to come out with a pin. That's correct. And that this is like a hangover from V1. At the end of an assault in version 1, both sides, the winner still ended up with a pin because the assault had you disordered. They dropped that rule in infantry assault, but they kept it for tanks. It's probably just some sloppy rules writing. But so there's some real tactics here. So someone pulls up and they put their armored car up next to your objective, and it's the end of the game. And you need that armored car to be gone. You could shoot it, right? But now you got to roll to hit, and usually in this game it's a 4 to hit or a 5, and then you've got to penetrate all the rest. Or you can just charge it, right? and then if a tank goes in and charges a soft skin vehicle, it's just almost always destroyed. Here's another one. If you charge an artillery piece, you survive the defensive fire, right? The minute you make contact with the artillery piece, it's destroyed automatically. So vehicle charging is actually really powerful. And then finally, we won't do this math tonight, but finally, you can also charge buildings. And it works exactly the same way, except that the buildings have armor values. So a wood building has a lower armor value than, I think it's a D6, and the stone building has a 2d6 armored value. So if you go
Sweet.
in and you charge your super heavy tank into a building, you could conceivably destroy the entire building. But in following these same rules, the building bizarrely swings back at you. If you like this, maybe we'll come back and do buildings one day, and we'll go through all the crazy things that happen in buildings. But I would
That's
encourage.
not a bad idea, because buildings, I often don't even use a lot of buildings. I'll usually use rubble for that reason, because there's buildings are really they're their own thing. That
Um,
might be a good one to do as a follow up.
it's the building rules are they're actually quite powerful, and you can use them. You can do a lot of things with buildings. There's a lot of positives. We saw one of the negatives tonight, but there's a lot of positives of how to play buildings properly and how to use them to win games. And it's a it's a good topic. But this tanks going around charging each other is really fun. If you ever pull it off in the game, it's great. Tournament organizers should give a prize if anyone actually pulls it off. And it is so satisfying when you do it. So
Yeah, Chris was looking a little smug. He was like, "Yeah, I worked for that."
well, I think
Okay,
that is I think that's the end of the stuff that I prepared. Those were all the questions that I remembered from your event. It was a very nice tournament, by the way. Do you think we covered
thank
it
you.
all?
Yes, sir. Like I say, you even covered a couple of areas where I've had questions. The number one thing, whether you have the rules right or wrong, of course, you want to have them right. I think the biggest thing is, at least within a play group, being consistent. That still won't stop you from getting the shock when you go outside of your group and suddenly find out you've had the rule wrong. And I think we've all had that. So the purpose here, when you mentioned to me, you said, "Hey, let's do a video covering these rules most commonly questioned." Because I really, one of the purposes, huge purposes of my work in the hobby is to continue to teach people about gaming and how to be better gamers, and this definitely meets that criteria. To be honest, I can't think of any other questions other than when's your next tournament? And what are you thinking about playing, if you want to share?
So I think I'm going to be able to make NashCon. I was actually
Okay.
talking about Randy about maybe going up there and doing that. You should come, and we can all drive in the same car. In fact, you guys could come and stay at my place in Atlanta on the way up, and then we could roll into NashCon. But that would probably be my next one. And I've been playing a
Okay.
lot with my French lately because it's a pretty army on the table, and because it's not Gurkhas. But I'm kind of feeling like if you ever want to play the over the top cheesy Gurkhas, you better do it now because they're likely to be nerfed in the next edition. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I may bring my paratroopers out and play them. Haven't decided.
that would be
Uh,
very cool. And I gotta say, and I gotta give a tip to the bolt action guys, because as we've talked about, bolt action is at its core an infantryman's game. And what I often see is people, the smart players, are taking low to medium point tanks. So when I started contemplating the 1940 French army for bolt action, I'm like, yeah, it should be competitive. French infantry is, historically was pretty darn solid, other than being poorly led at the operational level. Their tanks, especially during 1940, but French armor in one flavor or another actually saw action all the way up till at least D-Day. And so, at the level that we play bolt action, heck yeah, the French are competitive. So I was really glad to see it. I was really pleased to see. I think you bring out a French army, and then I think I had another guy that brings out the French. And the only reason I haven't done it yet is, I have this pile of plastic I'm trying to plow my way through. So, but thank you. That's going to be Gator Games may go to NashCon as a vendor. I'm talking with my wife about that now, so won't be playing if I do that. But I'm definitely considering going up there. Um, Sherwood War Games was recommending that I go, and I've never been to NashCon. I've been associated with Mid South for shoot 20 years, and just never made the time to go up there. But that'll be fun. I know you and or Randy will get pictures if you go. So that's fantastic. Well, I think that's going to be it for the Gator Show tonight. If you'll hang around just a touch after we exit the studio, we'll wrap up between you and I. But again, this has been John Ross who again runs the War. Help me out here, brother. I'm drawing a blank at 10 o'clock at night.
Warzone
Uh, War up in
Atlanta.
Atlanta. And if you get a chance to go, I've heard fantastic things about both the venue and the food. So if it's worth going. It's not an inexpensive event, but it is one of those. I think it's a two day tournament. I think the price covers room, board, and 2 days of bolt action if you're up for such things. So I guarantee you, if that's not enough bolt action for you, I just don't know what to tell you. But with all that being said, this is Gators Garage signing off. As always, click like and share all the YouTube things, and we will have links for this PowerPoint as well as for the Facebook group WarZone Atlanta in the description below. Thank you and good night.